It's become a through street to 680, and there's a lot of commuter traffic. It climbs uphill going west, so drivers come around the corner at the trail crossing and put on the gas to climb the hill. The other direction, they get rolling down the hill, and the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit is really a joke. I would say the average, if an assessment was done, is significantly higher than that. I've talked to the Walnut Creek Police, and that's why I'm here, because they said they can't really do much about it. They have given the temporary radar signs from time to time, and I've asked them to come write the reports and hang out and be on the street more. You know, I understand people aren't going to go 25 probably, but they're going 35, 40, 45, 50. So what I am asking in this letter is some kind of solution, and I'm thinking, I don't know that much about traffic, but I'm thinking traffic calming strips, permanent radar signs like there is down on San Luis Road, or just more police enforcement, or other things that Matt and I have talked about. So I hope you will consider it. I hope you'll take a look at the letter. It has more details on it.
Great.
Yeah, any
Thank
questions?
Nope. But did you fill out a speaker card?
I did.
You did, okay. And do you want to hand the letter to us?
Thank you
It
very
is.
much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker?
Hi there. Again, thank you for allowing us to come here and speak to you tonight. My name's Ellen Castleman, wife of Ken, live on Conejo Way. I could repeat a lot of what Ken said over the 30-plus years that we've lived there. You know, traffic has increased, as well as the speed, the percentage of the speed of drivers on our street. Just a couple of anecdotes. Driving on our street, in order to turn into my driveway, I need to make a hard right 90-degree turn. So of course I go out just a little bit, not into the lane of oncoming traffic, but just a little, and then to go in. Twice drivers have tried to pass me on the right. I normally drive, because I want to be respectful of our street, between 25 and I'll admit 25 to 30 miles per hour. I mean, I really do try to keep it slow. I've routinely also had people pass me on the left because they just want to, you know, go through. The street didn't used to be a throughway at the trail crossing. It used to be, I believe, 2 cul-de-sacs, but way before we moved in, they opened it up. And so I was going to check on Google Maps, but I'm almost positive it will show that as the way to get to the freeway. My son, who's 29, he's not a kid, when he's driving, he just routinely pulls over and lets people pass because they're tailgating and driving too fast. A lot of folks on the street have the slow down signs, they have the little person. Attached, the last page is a petition that some neighbors have signed on to. It's just a start that we wanted to get some initial signatures of people who support this effort. But I mean, we've talked for years about how we really need something to help people not speed, not just fly down our street. Yeah, so anyway, thank you so much for taking this into consideration.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
I'm not seeing any.
These are extras.
Enjoy dinner. Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda is the adoption of the January 16th, 2025 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion for?
So moved.
You aren't going to let me finish? Wow.
I got places to go later, you know.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Well, prior to the motion, I have a question on the minutes, if I may.
Sure.
I believe it said in there we had an update on the Woodlands traffic calming. I'm not recalling that, but will there be more updates on that project down the road?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't think you guys have gotten far enough probably with your studies. Okay, thank you. Then with that, I'm happy to second the motion.
Great. Will you take the roll? Will you take the roll?
Student Commissioner Kirsch, Commissioner Ash,
Aye.
Commissioner Krelling,
Aye.
Commissioner Patch,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cagle,
Aye.
Chair Reese.
Aye. Okay, next on the agenda is an item for commission consideration, the election of a new chair and vice chair. At this time, I will open up this item for public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to provide public comment?
We have no members of the public looking to provide comments on this.
That's your. So we missed
so-
some information.
Yeah, so I think here is where we open it up for discussion amongst yourselves about what you want to do.
Yeah, so I'm going to now open up the discussion for the commission to discuss who should be the next chair and vice chair of this commission for the next year.
If she's willing to, I think Sam has the expertise and the knowledge to lead us yet again. This would be your second time, and it would be an honor if a motion was made, if you would accept.
I would be happy to.
Okay. Do I have a motion for the election of the new chair?
I would. Do you want to? I don't want to steal your thunder.
He was going to ask for discussion still, so I wasn't. That's why I didn't make the motion.
Well, I would. Well, unless
Do you want to have a discussion?
no, my discussion comment is Commissioner Cahill has served as vice chair, and I think in normal course of business, should be chair.
Great, that's a second. Secretary, will you take the roll?
Student Commissioner Kirsch, absent. Commissioner Ash,
Aye.
Commissioner Krelling,
Aye.
Commissioner Patch,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cagle,
Aye.
and Chair Reese.
Aye. I'll now open up the discussion for the vice chair. Do we have suggestions for nominations?
I have a question for the secretary. Were both Charles and Laura appointed at the same moment in time? Was one 5 minutes, like I think Sam Cagle was a week before me? An official appointment, so she's more senior? Do we know?
What
We
an
don't
interesting question.
I know they had orientation at the same time, so it was definitely
It's
twins
like
at
we're
birth kind of thing.
twins and born 1 minute apart, right?
Do we know who would win an arm wrestling match? No, sorry. This is recorded, sorry.
Wow, second interesting question. So I will offer myself up. I'm an experienced chair from the Design Review Commission, vice chair of the Design Review Commission, and longtime chair of the Contra Costa County Merit Board. That being said, I offer up my services, but if the commission would like to choose otherwise, I'm okay with that too.
Commissioner Patch?
I think that makes sense as somebody who has expertise. That would be a great element for our vice chair.
So, Mr. Chair, can I make a motion?
Yes, you may.
I'd like to motion that this guy be appointed vice chair of the Transportation Commission for the 25-26 calendar cycle.
And his name is?
Charles Keating.
Right, thank you.
Do we have a second?
You have a second?
I will second that motion.
Great. Secretary?
Well, I think before we vote, though, we should ask if, like, how many minutes apart was the motion and the second, in the spirit of Commissioner Ash's questions.
What we're doing is we're delaying this commission, so Commissioner Jarrett is late. wherever it is that he's trying to get to.
No, I was trying to look up his map and where he was, and I don't know that Google. Anyway.
Student Commissioner Kirsch, absent. Commissioner Ash,
Aye.
Commissioner Krelling,
I
Commissioner Patch,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cagill,
Aye.
Chair Reese.
Aye.
Yeah, you're fine.
She should go on the pilot seat.
You want to go in the pilot seat? Sure. Because your name is there.
Captain sits in the left seat.
While they're moving seats, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege to thank Mr. Reeves for his service to this committee and for his expertise in leading us with decorum and grace.
Thank you.
All right, where are we at? Excellent, thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Commissioner Reese, now, for your service as chair. You did an excellent job and led us through some of the busiest Transportation Commission meetings we've had, so grateful for your leadership. Thank you. Okay, so that moves us on to our next item, which is the Downtown Curbside Management Plan. Staff is going to do an overview of curbside management strategies, existing city plans and goals, as well as the preliminary findings from the city's downtown curbside management plan data collection. I invite staff to make their presentation.
Thank you, Chair Cagill. Evening. So my name is Brianna Byrne. I'm Associate Traffic Engineer here at the City of Walnut Creek. And tonight I will be presenting on the city's curbside management project. The agenda for tonight, it is a bit long, so I do have a break in the middle where you'll be able to ask any clarifying questions. Each one of these slides has a slide number, so as the question arises, feel free to take the note and we can navigate back as needed. So the first item or the first discussion point will be what's the role of Transportation Commission as it relates to curb management. In part one, we'll do an overview of the curb. What are the demands for the space? What current curb management policies, what current curb management strategies we implement. And then moving into part two, we have our downtown curbside management plan. So this is the background, the goals, the timeline. We'll dig into some existing data. And at that point, we are soliciting feedback. So the Transportation Commission serves as the city's parking authority in the development, review, and implementation of a city parking plan. After the City Council adopts this plan, the Commission can alter the following if applicable and recommended through the plan. So that's parking rates and hours of operation. So going into part one is an overview of the curb space. So for the purpose of this conversation and our curb management plan, curb space is the area where you usually see people park, bus stops, loading zones, but that space can be used for bike lanes, curb extensions, or parklets. When we talk about management, it's organizing these uses along the curb based on transportation and community goals. And it's about seeking the balance among all those users. So I have two photos, the lower left, just a typical block, parking block in downtown Walnut Creek, that's South Main Street, where we just have 3-hour parking metered spaces. And on the right, we have a streetscape at Main Street and Bonanza. So through the intersection, it's bulbed out. There's, from a safety perspective, no desire for parking through the intersection. And so it became a streetscaping opportunity. So the curb space, it serves many different users, different functions at different times in the day. So it's about managing all of the competing interests. So moving into vehicles, the one that likely comes to mind is short-term and long-term parking. Within the downtown, we have 2 zones. We have a 3-hour zone and a 10-hour zone. We have ADA parking stalls. These are spread out through downtown. Where streets aren't wide enough for parking or loading, that curb space is used as a vehicle travel lane. We have emergency access needs, so fire hydrants and fire lanes. And that photo that we have there with the red curb is an example of one of our aerial access points for fire. So it's striped red for their purpose, for their needs. We have commercial loading, that's the yellow. Passenger loading, it would be a white curb. And think the curb space in front of the movie theater for dropping and picking up moviegoers. So then we have food delivery. Think about our 15-minute pickup spots, and then trash collection and pickup. They need access to those bin spaces. So the next one is streetscapes. Think of these as the pedestrian experience. So with that curb space, it's opportunity for outdoor dining with excess sidewalk width. We can do signage, benches, landscaping, green infrastructure, shading, trees, lighting, and at intersections, there's the opportunity for curb extensions, which is that safety improvement to reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians. Moving on to bicycles. Where we don't have parking, bike lanes can be curb adjacent, so this would take up that curb real estate. Then we have separated dedicated curbside and shared space enhancements. So these could be along the curb, and I give an example of a bicycle parking space here. We were activating unused curb space on South Main Street, south of Cypress. But this could be, in a shared space with the pedestrians. Similarly, we have e-bike charging stations and possibly bike repair stations, or we could have as an opportunity. Lastly, we have transit. So infrastructure-wise, along our curb, we have bus stops, and these could be in-lane stops. We have several downtown, or they could be dedicated turnouts. These are typically on maybe higher speed, higher volume roads. California Boulevard being an example. Possible sidewalk enhancements as they relate to transit, shelters, route signage, wayfinding information. So digging into curb management. So what would our downtown look like without any type of rules or time limits or meters on our curb? So downtown Walnut Creek, we have an incredible amount of restaurants, services, retail, and it would attract visitors. So visitors, they want to shop, they want to dine, they want to patron these businesses. If they could park anywhere, it'd be first come, first serve. They'd be parking right outside of their business or their desired destination. And without, any reason to leave, they shop, they dine, and then there's no incentive for them to give that space up to someone else who wants to do the same. So we have reduced turnover. People park and stay at these, desirable spots for longer. And what also happens as more and more people come into the downtown, these curb spaces are occupied. When there's, no places to park and more people are coming in, it increases traffic congestion. There's the potential to lose new visitors. There's no space for them to pull into. And when it comes to, just operation of the businesses, deliveries can't be made. So looking at our current curbside management strategies, going down the list. So we, at our meters, we have time of day limits. So this is, it essentially establishes when we're doing the parking management hours. So for Walnut Creek, it's 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. Zone-based max duration. So I'd mentioned this earlier. We have 2 zones, essentially. We have a green zone, which is 3 hours, and a 10-hour zone. 3 hours is, really in that core downtown as we think of it, and 10 hours is on the outskirts. The curb demand outcome, it's intended to create turnover. On its own, it's not as effective. It's hard to enforce from an operational standpoint. So meters help with that turnover. For our 2 zones, we have green, so that's $2 an hour. For our zone-based pricing, that core area is $2 an hour, and purple, so on these outskirts, are $1 an hour. And that really incentivizes the turnover, puts a financial incentive to relocate if they're not intending to stay longer or continue shopping. So we have our curb pickup location. So this is intended for a quick pickup of fast food restaurant dining options. Commercial loading, we have 20-minute commercial loading zones intended to deliver goods. Accessible parking, these are distributed through our downtown, providing parking for those with accessibility needs. Passenger loading, so again, this is the white curb, intended for pickup and drop off of people. And then to help with the minimizing of congestion, we have wayfinding signage to the garage. So they're specifically to the garages because we want to get drivers to a place with a higher parking supply where they're more likely to get that parking space that they're hoping for. So moving into this concept of the 85th percentile occupancy goal. So again, talking about that frustration of if we didn't have any curb management, there's nowhere for you to find parking. This 85 percentile goal is a goal across the industry where if you look at the bottom image there, it's roughly, 1 space available for every 10 spaces. So as you're driving along a curb face, you're going to be able to find a parking spot. So at this goal, parking's easy to find, and our curb space, our asset, is utilized effectively. The target occupancy rate within the industry, it can be set a little bit higher, 85 to 95. And that's because those garages, they're intended for, more long-term parking, past, say, that whatever the meter is set for. And the turnover within those garages where we have more spaces is less of a priority. And with that, I will pause, see if there's any questions so far.
Okay. Any questions from the commissioners? Yeah, start at the end.
Can you pull back the slide with the table with all the numbers? Yeah. So first question, how do we get to 10 to 8? Could we be more profitable at 9 to 9? I may hate that because I have a lot of 9 a.m. coffees, but I'm just kind of curious, like how do you get there, right, at that hour?
Yeah, so I can't quite speak to where those specific hours came from, but typically the outcome, the desired outcome, is when we want to be managing our parking, our curb space. So it's when do we need to start managing the demand, the people coming into the downtown area. That's kind of how you set those limits. Yes.
Right, to keep that number managed. Okay, and then. Are there, for the loading zones, are there permits for that? And how does that work? Is there a charge for vehicles that use those? How does that all work?
So commercial vehicle types, so like those larger trucks, I believe they have a permit, or they have a commercial permit. I know business owners, they can register their vehicle as, say, a commercial vehicle and have access to that curb space. Okay. But we don't currently charge to use it. No.
Okay, and then two more quick questions. In the parking garages, how often do we have issues with like the gates or the payment machines where there might be a breakdown or like some other problem that causes more problems?
I can't speak to the frequency. I do know that, say, like when the ticket machines, they run out of paper tickets, the operators will just put up the gate arms, so it doesn't create a traffic jam, say at the entrance, or maybe for a little bit until that problem is identified and fixed. But it does happen from time to time.
Okay, and then I heard recently somebody talking on transportation that cities who have meters don't actually use most of their parking space or don't meter most of their spaces because you could only meter between like those like loading zones or the passenger drop off or just places that don't make sense to meter. They don't get metered. Do you feel like we have 10% like where we just don't have physical infrastructure that would fit into our parking management? 20%? I don't know. I'm just.
I would say we've very well utilized our curb space, especially in the downtown core. The example of that bicycle parking space, it was an awkward spot. It couldn't really be used for much else.
Okay.
So we've taken the opportunities where we can, and I think our curb space is probably pretty full with what we can do.
Okay,
So I
awesome.
think it's metered, yes.
Thanks.
Vice Chair?
Thank you. I don't have a scheduled break in my questions, but they're pretty easy ones. How many downtown core curb parking spots do we have for regular cars?
Stay tuned for part 2.
Okay, awesome. Have we ever, I know this is going to sound like blasphemy, have we ever done a study or thought about what if we said no regular car parking, other outside of like ADA in the downtown core? It's like all those other uses, but no regular passenger cars. Is that something we've ever thought about and asked what would that look like and what would it do?
I know, so I've been with the city about 3.5 years, and I started middle of 2021. And that was when we had, coming out of the COVID pandemic, we had those kind of temporary parklets, outdoor dining situation. I know it was a conversation at one point, what if we turn some portion of the downtown into what's, pedestrian plaza or bicycle plaza. Some internal staff time was put on that. Outside of that, I'm not aware.
Okay. And I wasn't thinking of closing streets versus what would it look like if you just didn't have regular passenger cars parking on the curbs? It's for bikes, for the loading, unloading, maybe more landscaping, maybe more parklets. Just something to think about. Okay, those were slide 6. Slide 9, what is the demand, if any, for those public transportation shelters? And I ask that because they tend to be, A, unattractive, and worse, they tend to be magnets for graffiti.
I also don't have that off the top of my head, but I do know we are doing a Better Bus Stops project with, looking at are these shelters in the best, the most popular stops. So it is something that staff is looking at.
Okay, then slide 10, because I think it talked about meters in here and kind of controlling the curb. And this is probably predates you, so I don't expect you would have the answer, but what impact did we notice, if anything, when we changed the meter hours to 10 to 8 and when we went to 7 days a week, 365 days a year of metering? Did that have a negative impact or any impact? And
I cannot speak to that. Looking around at staff who's been here longer, I think that all predates us as well.
okay. And then I was just in looking at this, and the slide implies we want to increase turnover, but there's a sweet spot. If people can't keep their spot long enough so they can both shop and eat and have to rush out to the meter and move their car, does that harm our commerce at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, as we look further into the strategies based on the data that we'll get into later, that's absolutely part of the conversation. It's like trying to, from staff's perspective and the management of our curb, we're trying to get downtown visitors and users to park in the appropriate location based on how long they're going to be there. So if they intend to be there, less than an hour, less than 2 hours, less than 3 hours based on our current meters, park on the street. Otherwise, let's get them into the garages and keep that turnover on the street.
Yeah, I was always curious what the impact was on the Broadway Plaza parking lot, the one that Macerich owns, when they went from free to the first 3 hours are free, and if that impacted, people are like, they may have stayed 5 or 6 hours shopping, but they didn't want to pay parking. Those were slide 10, and then finally slide 11. Do we have any level of complaints from people generated by the pickup drivers, the Uber Eats, the Door Dashers? I see them slamming in and slamming out, when I go walking downtown. Is there any history of complaints from people about like, hey, all these pickup drop-off are, creating havoc?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, we have received complaints, and the big one is the use. They will use our 15-minute curb pickup spaces, which were intended for all, but those are proving hard to enforce as well. So they are using those and, double parking or being where they shouldn't be.
Thank you.
Commissioner Patch? Since we're on this slide, we can start on this slide. Okay, our vice chair kind of touched on this about when the time was changed and then moved to every day, but do we have any feedback on the 8 p.m. ending time specifically? Like, have people complained to staff or anything about how late it goes?
Complaints, I would say it's more like feedback. So what I've heard anecdotally is, so maybe you come to dinner and you park maybe, I don't know, 6:30, 7. You only have to pay an hour, and now you're there for the rest of the night. So for those visitors that are coming maybe later into the evening, that they're not getting that turnover, they're circling the block, they're ending up in the garage or somewhere further out. Yeah.
All right. And has there been any discussion about potentially like decreasing the time on the meters, like from 3 hours to 2 hours or something of that nature?
So that's something that we reviewed and discussed as part of this plan. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, then can we go back to a slide, or actually let's go to slide 12. Do we know if we're hitting this goal? Are we close to it? Are we
Part
over?
2.
Part 2. All right. I'm gonna. Do we have an occupancy goal for the garages?
So currently our Muni code, it's a blanket statement. So 85% downtown. So that's inclusive of our curb and our garages.
But the goal of staff in general is to get people into the garages rather than street if they're there for longer periods of time, right?
Correct. Yeah. If they intend to stay longer.
Okay. And does staff have any feedback on like location? Because you've mentioned a couple of times like circling around the block and stuff. If we're hitting this 85%, there's spaces available, but it might be 3 blocks away instead of 2 blocks away? Do you get any of that kind of feedback, or have you studied that at all?
Yeah, and that's about trying to manage the curb in such a way that there is like guiding people if they do want that street space, further out. They maybe don't want to pay as much, so they can go further out, or they intend to stay longer, so they go further out. It's all part of like reviewing the strategies and what can come from this plan. So it's part of it.
Cool. And then I have a question, but you don't have to go back to the slide. On slide 8, you mentioned repair stations for bicycles. Do we actually have any of those right now, or is that just a?
So I would say we had one. Oh, at the library. So yeah, we've done it. I want to say there's been an issue with like taking the tools,
Yeah.
and then the cost to keep up with that repair station. But yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Commissioner Reese?
Yeah, thanks for part 1. Looking forward to part 2. On this slide, you talk about the 85% goal. How do you incentivize people to park in the parking garage over parking on the street if you intuitively want more cars in the garage?
Yeah, and that as we get further into this process and the plan, there's many strategies, but I want to say one that San Francisco has been doing is playing with the pricing of their meters, increasing where they see that 85% get hit, routinely. They'll increase it by a quarter quarterly, and trying to hit that sweet spot. So they've been pretty successful with the pilot program,
So
revolving.
dynamic pricing.
Correct.
Got it. Do we price the parking garages differently than we do the street? So if I park in the Locust parking garage, do I pay a different hourly rate than if I parked on Locust Street near the Pete's?
So Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but the parking garages are $125.
Free for the first hour, $1.25 after that, I think.
Thank you.
It depends on maybe on the exact garage, but
So they're cheaper than our green poles and slightly more expensive than our purple poles.
Okay, great. Do you mentioned that the business owners can get a commercial loading permit to be able to use the yellow zone. Do we monitor the yellow zones to see if those business owners are using it to park their car all day, or just using it to load or unload their vehicle and leave?
So when like an enforcement officer approaches a normal passenger vehicle, they would scan the plates, and then the plates, they'd pop up, this is allowed to use it. On the next round, if that's still there, at the discretion of the officer, but
So we have the ability to check that. Okay. I know the city of Berkeley does not have that ability, and so the loading zones are always full with business owners who park all day in the loading zone. So I was just curious if we have that issue here in Walnut Creek.
I will confirm.
And maybe you're going to take care of this in part 2. I was curious, the parking garages do have count. I don't know if all of them do, but some of them have counters out front, so I know if there's available parking before I enter the garage. Do we know how accurate those are, or is that a part 2 question?
I would say they're pretty accurate. Yeah, it's gate up, add 1, gate, and then as you leave, then it subtracts 1. So it's real-time updates. So
Okay.
as far as I know, accurate.
Can you go to the table? Yes, thank you. I would, What, that's not a question. For the zone-based maximum duration, you say that we have 3-hour and 10-hour parking, but I've seen 1 hour in the area. And what is that for?
Do you have a specific location?
Pringle Avenue, next to the bar that opened up there, and the Waymark. It's 1 hour parking, and it's 1 hour parking around the Waymark, and so so I was just curious why that one area is 1 hour but it's not in this table.
Yeah, Smidar Boardman, city engineer. So we do have a smattering. This really speaks to, the pricing of our meters, but that duration, we do have like some 30-minute spots, 1 hour, in different locations, and they're really use-based. And so I think we had a couple that were 30 minutes, and those were based on having ATMs nearby or something, so people could quickly pop out of their car and go over. And then I think the one near BART may be a legacy location based on what was around BART previously, or maybe it was more related to some of the uses in the like the ground floor near the in the Golden Triangle. So, this plan will look at those, but they're not really from a high level. That's not really intended to be one of the strategies that are in place, but there are some specific picks there.
Yeah, Lunacy, that's the name of the bar. So it's difficult to go there because it's 1 hour parking. But anyway, that's a comment, so I retract that. Let's see. Those are the only questions that I have for the first part. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome, Student Commissioner Kirsch. You kind of walked in during the presentation, so I don't assume that you have any questions. Do you?
No questions for now. Thank you.
Okay. And Commissioner Reese has one more question. Sorry.
I see that the parking hours, it's been mentioned, it's 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. If we were to adjust those and say go to 9 to 9 or 10 to 9 or whatever, does that affect the staffing of the enforcement? I know if we enforce longer, it's naturally you're going to have people out there longer, but is the 10 to 8 related to work hours for the enforcement crews, or is there?
So what I'd say, yeah, if we change the hours, yeah, they would shift their schedule as well. I do know, in speaking with the enforcement officer supervisor, this current 12-hour makes it easy to split shifts.
Okay, because it's 12 hours versus 11 or 13 or things like that, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I have a few questions, and I have a feeling you might tell me that some of these are for part 2, but I wanted to ask what we're talking about tonight. Does it reflect the new daylighting, I think it's called, law about parking 20 feet from the curb and how our parking is impacted downtown, both in quantity and, quantity?
So yeah, the daylighting law that restricts parking 20 feet in advance of a marked and unmarked crosswalk. Tonight's presentation doesn't really speak to that specifically, but that's new curb space for the city to essentially activate in some other way, whether it's with parklets or streetscaping. But yeah, that's opportunity sites.
Okay, great. And as far as the commercial loading zones are concerned, I'm curious if we've talked a little bit about those so far, and I'm curious if we have looked at if there's enough space for the demand. I know I've experienced commercial trucks loading and blocking lanes, and it's been a traffic issue. So I'm curious if there isn't enough, or if those people are just breaking the law perhaps and didn't want to park in the commercial zone that's however many yards away or whatever.
So I'd say jumping ahead to maybe presentation too, but yeah, so we are doing outreach as part of this plan, and we are asking about, our business owners hearing anything from their commercial drivers. I would say from the enforcement side, speaking of delivery drivers, they are also using those spaces not legally, and so commercial drivers have to find other locations.
Okay. And then have we in the past ever had any programs for local, like, retail and restaurant workers who need to find parking downtown that could potentially be costly for a lower wage worker? Because I know I've also experienced workers parking in places that are free and scooting into downtown and that kind of a thing. So I'm curious if we've ever had programs for the local workforce.
So yeah, part two, but
Part two. Okay.
yes and no.
Okay. All right. I'll leave it at that, and we can go ahead and launch into part two, and then we'll take questions from the commission from part two, and then open it up for public comment. Thank you.
Okay, so part two is really about this curbside management plan. Ultimately, we're studying parking demand in our downtown area to create a management policy about how best and efficiently to optimize our curb space. We're balancing parking, loading, pedestrian, bicycle infrastructure, placemaking, accessibility, safety, and equity. So a lot of balancing act here. The work that's being done in this plan, we are building off of the city's Rethinking Mobility Plan. This is a 2019 plan, and three of the strategies within that plan were related to or tie into this curbside management plan. So we have improve parking and curb management signage, evaluate zone and demand-based pricing, and consider municipal garage pricing and demand. So this project we're working on now will build off of the work that was done in that previous plan. So a little bit more background. We're doing this work through an MTC grant. We received about $200,000 in grant funds to do the work. MTC assigned us this fantastic team. We have our plan development, Fair and Pierre's, Dixon Resources Unlimited. They're doing the data collection. And then Winters is doing our outreach and stakeholder engagement. So we started this existing condition data collection in fall of 2024, and we went through very early January of 2025. Right now, we're at the analyze data and existing policy phase and looking to get this plan in front of council by the end of the year. So between now and when this plan is getting finalized, we're doing a bunch of stakeholder engagement. One of those engagement opportunities we're using is Transportation Commission. So staff, we're anticipating a minimum of 3 presentations. So the first one being tonight. May, we're doing project updates and looking to highlight the input we've received from all of our outreach, or as much as we've been able to get to by that May date. And then for the summer, one of the summer Transportation Commission meetings, present that plan to you all. So this is the study area that we are looking at as part of this plan. So area A, again, we're talking about like what we think of as a core downtown. We did tuck in a couple outlier streets. So you can see Main Street. This is in the Kaiser area, the Los Lomas area. That got tucked into A. There's some meters over by Safeway off of Broadway and Mount Diablo. And then Bonanza Street and north of Civic, These, they have some similar land uses to downtown, and so we had kind of grouped them in to our Area A. Area B, this is, our north downtown specific plan area. Auto, heavy auto up there. And then our Area C, our west downtown specific plan area, some residential, lots of services, some commercial, so along Mount Diablo and Olympic and Alpine area. So as you can see, this is quite a large area, and this is a data-driven plan. And so we, in order to get as much data as we can, we did license plate readers. So between 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., a vehicle equipped with license plate readers drove every single street in each direction multiple times. So what this does is as it passes a vehicle, it creates a unique identifier for that vehicle. And then on the second, third pass, fourth pass through, is that vehicle still there? It tracks its duration. If it moves somewhere else through the network, where did it move to? So we did this data collection in October on a weekday and a weekend. Okay, so the question of how many spaces. So within that larger area, ABC, our on-street parking, so this is metered and unmetered, we have about 1,500. In that area that we were looking at, the city garages, and I have here listed the Broadway garage, South Locust, Lesher, and Library, and we'll see a map again of where each of these are. But between those garages, also about 1,500. So within this study, we're looking at 3,000 city spaces. Knowing that kind of parking should be looked at a holistic perspective, we did also get some non-city operated lots and garages. The two big ones are Broadway Plaza garages. So there's one off of South Main and one off of South Broadway. And then there's a couple small lots through downtown that we got as well. Okay, so going into Area A, so think core downtown, we primarily have these green meter heads, so 3-hour on-street meters wherever we could fit them. So the garages, this is also, where, because we have the peak demand, we have a lot of garages out here. So the Lesher Center, City Garage, that's off of Civic and Locust, and it serves our Lesher Center. The library, there is an underground garage. So that's off of Broadway and Lincoln. We have the South Locust Garage. This is near, Pete's, Sweet Greens. It's just north of Mount Diablo on Locust. And then the city's Broadway Garage. I'm going to be saying Broadway a lot, so I'm going to try to distinguish. So there's the city's Broadway Garage. This is has an entrance off of Cypress. And then there's the Broadway Plaza Garage. As I mentioned, there's two as part of that. So one on South Main and one on Broadway. So looking at the peak occupancy on a weekday on street, we're at 88%. So this is over that 85, that goal of ours, 85. So this is where that congestion, that frustration, that's circling the block, this is the situation that's happening. And in that same moment in time in the garages, we're at 57% occupancy. So there are spaces available. It's just we're not getting the drivers to these parking spaces. Looking at our Saturday, on street, it was actually lower at 82%, but our garages, they jumped. They're at that 76%. So the weekend drivers are going to our garages. Breaking it down by garage. So the first two here are the two Broadway Plaza garages. So on a weekday, they're both one's 48% and the other one's about a third full. Looking at Saturdays, South Broadway jumps to 62, but that South Main Street is at 90%, so over that 85. So it really serves that Saturday visitor crowd. Looking at the city's Broadway garage, it's actually more busy on the weekdays, at about 58% occupied, and then 41% on the weekend on a Saturday. Lesher and the library stayed consistent, generally between a weekday and a Saturday. And then at our South Locust garage, that weekday peak was 62%, but on the Saturday, for that dinner time rush, it hit the 100%. It was at capacity. So turnover. So again, looking at how long people are staying, these are a typical October weekday and weekend. So our on-street parking, on average, between weekdays and weekends, about an hour 20. That's a pretty good turnover rate. Like if you think someone pulls out, there's the opportunity for some new visitor to dine and to partake in our what the downtown has to offer. Going to the Broadway Plaza garages, we combine them here. But those two garages, they saw about 2.5 hours, which did match our Locust and Library, about 3 hours to 2 hours. The Broadway and Lesher garages, as you can see here, the difference between how long people were staying differed between a weekday and a Saturday. So that is digging into our monthly parking passes. So the city, we do have a monthly parking pass program. It's $50 a month, and the passes go to Broadway Garage, the city's Broadway Garage, Locust, and Lesher. The program itself is managed by Laz Parking, and the passes were set at 600 available, and this does include city employee passes. Those 600 spaces were split up, so Lesher gets 360 of them, Locust 40, and Broadway 200. All 600 of these passes are claimed, and there's a wait list. So while the program does exist, it's not automatic to get on it. So if we separate out those pass holders from the visitors, we do see between the Broadway, the Lesher, and the Locust, people are getting close to that 3-hour mark. And this is consistent with what we were seeing in the other garages. So this data collection was done in October. Staff, we really wanted this to be a data-driven process plan. So we, Dixon, there's an opportunity for us to get an LPR device. And so I worked with, I got us a vehicle. I worked with our parking enforcement crew. We equipped one of our own vehicles and we drove around downtown. I drove around a full day. We did more than a couple, but for 3 weeks or so leading up to the Christmas holiday, we got multiple more weekdays, Saturdays and Sundays, to really understand the peak of what happens in our downtown outside of these typical conditions. Okay, so starting with Saturday, again, we're still talking Area A here, but on a Saturday, it jumped our on-street spaces. So now our Saturday, they're getting that frustration, they're getting that circling the block, that congestion is building. On the weekday, we actually saw a drop in this. As we dug into the data, this had more to do with those outlying areas that we included as part of the study. The core, it's over the 85, but it's these outlying areas that saw the drop, and they were enough of the network to bring that average down. Looking at the garages, we see that many of these garages are being very well utilized. So looking at the Broadway Plaza garages, weekday and a Saturday, both garages are over that 85%. Our own city garage, our own city Broadway garage, is actually similar to typical conditions. So on a weekday, 76%, and it drops slightly on the Saturdays. Lesher and Locust at capacity on weekdays. And looking at the Saturdays for those two, Lesher peaked at 65% on a Saturday, and Locust at 100% capacity again. Library, similar to typical conditions, stayed relatively consistent between weekdays and weekends. Now looking at that turnover aspect, so On Street had the largest jump in how long people were staying. So those 3-hour meters, people were getting closer to that limit. So between typical conditions and the holiday time, an extra hour and 10 minutes. Broadway Plaza, Locust, and Library really stayed consistent. Looking at Broadway and Lesher, and these are where we have the employee parking, we dug into those differences again. So the visitors, they also stayed similar to typical conditions, 3 hours. Those who held passes stayed longer, and what we saw for that weekday, and keep in mind Lesher reached capacity on that weekday in December, and we had event. So during December we have the Nutcracker, and whenever large events come to the Lesher, we do $5 or $5 event parking. So those users, those specific users that got that event parking rate, on average stayed about 6 hours. So that makes sense. You see the production, you go out to dinner and you do the shopping, and it's somewhere between that typical visitor and those pass holders. A quick overview on areas B and C. So primarily 10 hours where we do have meters. These are the areas where if we don't have curb space, or if we don't have meters along the curb, they're more likely to be in these areas. And where we have off-street parking, they're typically provided by the business that's right there. So area B, on a weekday, so area B, this is the auto area. The peak was actually in the morning between 9 a.m. and noon, and that peaked at about 70%, and it was still less than what we saw in area A. On a Saturday, the peak was in the afternoon at 54%, still less than what we were seeing for area A. Looking at area C, so this is that west downtown specific area. Both weekday and a Saturday, their peak was that 12 to 6 period, and both significantly less than what we were seeing in the downtown area A. So compared to area A, people in B and C, these are where we have the 10-hour meters. They were staying somewhere around 3 hours. So area B a little bit less than that 3 hour, and area C a little bit more. So as I had mentioned, LPR, license plate readers, they create unique identifiers for vehicles. We used that unique identifier to identify whether or not a car that was parked in one area of downtown was found in another area of downtown. So this could be those employees that don't get a pass having to relocate at some point through the day. They could be delivery drivers, food pickup, but it is happening. And so over those 11 days of data collection that we did, the top 5 block faces where this happened, so North California, between Almond and Bonanza, and then Locust, and North Main. So these are right in that downtown area. In speaking with our enforcement, kind of what they thought of this data, that California jumped out to them as that would, of these locations, that would maybe be the employees that are showing up over there. Those are the 10-hour spaces. Okay, so data takeaway here. There is demand for parking in Area A. This is where we have our dense attractions, but we do have excess on-street supply in B and C. So where we do see that over 85%, typical conditions on a weekday, it's happening in Area A. On Saturdays, add in the Broadway Plaza and our South Locust Garage. During the holiday season, where we get this over goal, weekdays, it's Locust, Lusher, Broadway Plaza garages. On the Saturdays, all of those, and then in addition to this Area A on-street parking supply. Again, the duration that we're seeing, Area A, generally 1 to 2 hours. Area B and C, around 3 hours. For those that pick the parking garage, they're there for 3 hours or more. And there is a demand for our monthly parking passes given the wait list that we have. And so really from this data that we've collected so far, there is a need to reevaluate what curb management strategies we have and if they are working. So when I was discussing their timeline, we are doing stakeholder engagement. So we've met with some people already, and we're pursuing other meetings with other groups listed here. So we have our Parking Enterprise Fund team, our parking enforcement officers, our economic development team, Walnut Creek downtown, and this covers restaurants, retail, services, county connection, bicycle and pedestrian advocacy groups. And to get that Walnut Creek visitor input, we're looking to get a booth at the Locust Street Festival. And with that, I have some questions that we're hoping to get some feedback on. And it's, what are you hearing? What are you experiencing? And does that match what data that we have? And then what would you like to see more along our curb? And that's, for cars, for pedestrians, for bicyclists, for transit. And then of that list of stakeholders, and I do have them again here, is there anyone that we should be reaching out to that we haven't identified yet? And then do you, have thoughts on any of these specific curb management strategies that we had gone over in the beginning, those existing, our existing strategies?
Okay, thank you for that presentation. And before we give you feedback on the questions you have here, are there any questions of the commissioners? Okay, let's start at the end. Student Commissioner, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions for now.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ash?
Yes. This is a lot of information, so thank you for putting this all together. And I know collecting that much data was interesting, so I really appreciate you doing this. I wanted to ask about first in those graphs with the parking garage occupancy and even the meter occupancy, is there peak times, right? Because you say weekdays something could be filled, but is it really only over 85% for a 2 to 3 hour window, or is it all day? And I didn't see that you broke that down, but you might know.
Yeah. So the answer is there is that peak time, and it's around lunchtime. So 12, 1, and then again at dinner time. Those are the peak areas for that Area A in a smaller setting or a smaller time period.
And what about the parking garage? The same thing, or?
Yeah, I believe so. But off the top of my head, I cannot say for sure.
Okay. Just it's helpful to know, right? Like, are we dealing with a 2-hour window or is it all day? So that would be good as a follow-up item if you could get back to us on that. Parking for employees. Is there a pay on the meters? I know you can pay at the meters with coins or credit card. Isn't there a pay by phone system that we have too?
Correct.
And
Pay Mobile, Park Mobile.
and
yes.
what's the adoption rate of that? Do people use it? Do people not? Do we know?
So about 10% of people use Park Mobile, the Park Mobile feature, and then the rest do the cards or coins or cash.
Okay. Have we looked at in the garages? There's clearly some garages that continuously get more occupancy than others. Is that because they're the location? Because they have better wayfinding? Just kind of curious to get your take.
So I think there's it's a lot of things. So, it could be wayfinding, but we do know that people want to park closest to where they're going. So that South Locust garage, it kind of, you get good access to the north side of services and restaurants as well as the south side. So it's a very centrally located garage, and it's also one of our smallest ones. But yeah, so wayfinding, we've put together, we have signs throughout the city, but and focused at people coming in, but maybe they pass that one garage is at capacity, and now they're like, oh, where's the next one? And so we're always working to improve our wayfinding signage.
Okay. And then how have you looked to add in tech and cool on the license plate reading and the assigning the numbers? But I'm wondering how you've looked at incorporating more tech into this and what you've seen and into the met.
So, we have those count boards outside. I want to say we have an active project to use technology to create kind of gateway treatments to let people know coming into the city, hey, there's this many spaces at this garage, this at this garage, and this at another garage, and those are at gateway locations. And that project we have that project. And so that's one use of a technology that we've kind of discussed in speaking about that San Francisco pilot. Dixon, who did our data, they're working with the city actually on theirs, and it's very data intensive. A lot of LPR data collection has to be done in order to do that dynamic pricing component. So it's something that we're discussing and looking at from, as an opportunity.
Okay, just curious. And then I know you mentioned on the during like the rotation of people who are moving and parking and all of that. I know that has come up with employees that work here. Like in the downtown Walnut Creek, the retail, the restaurant workers, that there is a lack of parking in those parking passes. And I don't know if you were able to collect any specific data related to, or maybe there's a way to partner with Walnut Creek downtown and the chamber to see if we can't reach out to some of those people and study them, because I know from talking to property owners and business owners that there is a lack of parking for the employees, and the employees have to pay for it, which, cuts into us attracting enough employees to work in all those businesses compared to other cities where it's free.
Yeah, it's definitely part of the discussions that we're having with our downtown business owners. We are hearing the same. Okay. So it's something that we're looking at doing.
Cool. All right. I think that was all of my questions now. Thank you.
Great. Vice Chair?
Thank you. Thank you for part two.
Yeah.
both presentations, that was clearly a lot of work, and there's a lot of work that went behind the PowerPoint, so very appreciative. When we first started on page 14, you mentioned things like safety and equity being a part of the curbside management. I'm just curious, can you give me an example of how equity fits into the curbside management plan?
The example I like to point out is ADA spaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. This kind of applies to both slides 15 and 36. To the extent that any of the stakeholder engagement reach out are more of a meeting venue, getting together with groups of people, would you be willing to notify the commission? Because I'd love to sit and just kind of listen to people speak. I don't need to say anything or participate, but maybe other commissioners might be interested too. I would just want to sit and hear what people are saying. On slide 17, I thought it was fascinating what you're doing with the license plate readers and the unique identifiers, but that also led me to being worried about data privacy. And I'd like to be sure that there's no way that this data can be turned into, well, Charles parks in the library garage, 4 times a week, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a concern that we had that we had expected. And so in working with Dixon, so I said they created unique identifiers. So that vehicle had a unique identifier. The license plate, the information was completely scrambled and completely separated from that person driving that vehicle, information about that person. It was a unique identifier.
Did Dixon sign any kind of privacy agreement where if their raw data was hacked, they would bear some responsibility for data privacy violations?
I'd have to check specifically on that, but I know what they did sign is they agreed to delete the data after this project was done.
Great, thanks.
There are state privacy laws that address those identifiers.
Yes, but unfortunately, the level of breaches we see kind of leads me to believe that the laws aren't really being followed. I just thought of this on slide 18, but a general question. Can we get a copy of this presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. I was surprised, by the way, you answered one of my part 1 questions. I was surprised at the high proportion of street parking spots there were compared to garage spots. That was eye-opening for me. On page 20, we had a bunch of stats. I'm just curious if you've looked at how we compare to, or any of these statistical pages, how do we compare to other similar types of cities, like maybe, I don't know, like a Palo Alto or other places? I want to try to compare us to San Francisco because, or Oakland because it's so different, but more suburban cities.
So what I've seen the studies for the Oakland, the San Francisco. Those are the very, very impressive data studies. So that's kind of what I've been looking at. What I will say is that 85%, that's really an industry, that's a regular goal. How we're doing compared to other cities, I do not know.
Okay. Slide 22 and 28. It's more of a comment. I asked a question earlier. I think I got answered here. Well, let me ask you this. The Broadway Plaza Garage, are we talking about the Mesa Rich owned one behind Nordstrom and Macy's, or is that a different one?
Yes, that large one. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's very obvious, even during the holidays, people are very mindful of the 3-hour limit. And I kind of wonder data-wise, does the parking revenue earned, or actually it's all mostly foregone because people are trying to not pay, how is that hurting the commerce in the area? But the data you showed is great because it even on the holiday, it was 2 hours and 50 minutes. People are like, I got to get out of here. I don't want to pay. Okay, and then finally, rounding out to the end, back to your slide 37 with all the questions. Let me make sure I'm not, cannot make Walnut Creek down to the county. Okay, so I think a stakeholder that's just blinking red lights to me that's missing, the Walnut Creek residents.
If we can do just questions right now, and
Okay.
then we'll do comments later, if that's
Okay,
all right. I'm
sorry.
sorry, thank you.
Let's see here. I'm trying to see if this is a comment or a question, so.
Take your time.
It's probably, you know what I was doing, and I apologize, I was trying to answer these questions 1, 2, 3, 4, but they're comments, you're right. So I will hold off till we go to comments.
Lovely, thank you. Commissioner Patch?
Thank you for this information. A lot of data. Just for clarification, because I know we have it written down in our handouts, but in case anybody watches this, the MTC acronym is for the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, yes?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. And then on slide 21 and 27, either one is fine. So the breakdown here, because the library is so much lower than the rest, do you have the number of what that would change for the occupancy overall? Like if you just ignored the library, would it get us into that 85% goal?
Oh, I see what you mean. So we have that information, like the number of spaces occupied, but I don't know if that would
Okay.
if that would push us.
I'll save why I asked that later. Not do a comment right now. Okay, and then I just have a couple of questions that aren't related to any specific slides. I know that the Walnut Creek did a scooter pilot. I forget which with which company, but like the electric scooters. Do we have any data from that to be considered during this process?
So I know we had Lime bicycles, and that was out in the Shadelands area. As for data, I don't think
Okay.
so.
That's good to know. And then while you were doing this and driving around, did anybody note number of bicycles or how often bike racks were being used?
So I know for those October dates, I walked around myself and I took photos of where bicycles were parking, racks or not racks, and have started the habit of since doing that. So.
Okay. And then I am trying to understand the map, and I can't remember which slide it was on. Is the movie theater parking garage, which I understand is privately owned, is that in Area C?
That is in Area A.
Okay. But it wasn't one of the ones that you listed?
Correct. So there are a couple additional garages downtown, and it just had to do with they're not the cities, and so we had reached out to the garage operators, and they just didn't have the data available for us.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Reese?
So the so the Broadway Plaza garages had the data. So you didn't drive with the license plate readers through the garages.
Correct. We use the gate arm information similar to how the city collects
Okay.
occupancy.
On that, with the license plate reading equipment, how many rotations were you able to do on each day? And did you do it over multiple days then so that you could get a good number?
Yeah, so we did 9 to 12, 12 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, so 4 rotations. Area A had to be split up into 2 routes, actually. So when Dixon did it in October, they had more vehicles driving around. When I organized the city staff, I'd split up a day into Area C plus one of the A routes, and then the next weekday Area B with the other Area A route, so that people could get through the area during that holiday congestion and still get a break between routes.
So the October data was, they had multiple drivers, and then
Correct.
they did it over multiple days.
They did it over 1 weekday and 1 weekend with
Okay,
multiple drivers.
With multiple drivers.
Correct.
So do you know how many rotations they ended up? I mean, were they, when you're in the olden days when you used to walk, you would every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes you would walk down the street and you would note the write down the license plate. So were they going that frequently, or I'm trying to get a sense as to how detailed the data is, because you could go through a garage at 1 p.m. and it's packed, and then you go through that same garage at 2 p.m. or 1:45 after the lunch hour is over, and there's 50% available. So I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
how good the data is.
Yeah. So Area B and C, that's once every of those 3 hours they do the pass, going southbound and then northbound. Area A, having driven this route, there is a lot of backtracking. So within that 3-hour window, you're double backing, you're backtracking on a couple of those.
Okay.
We do have the information of how many passes each block had, so I can get that for you.
Yeah, I'm just curious how much data you had. On this map, I guess on this map, the two areas that stand out to me are the Almond Shoey neighborhood and the Lincoln Avenue neighborhood. Do we know, there's no meters in those neighborhoods, which means you can go and park there all day, all night. Do we know anything about if there's parking overflow, particularly from Area A into those neighborhoods?
So one of the curb management strategies that I didn't cover today is we have a residential parking permit program. And so the Almond Shoey area, you have to have a residential permit to park in that area. So any overflow from the downtown, you're going to get ticketed if you park in that neighborhood without that permit.
Okay, great. Speaking for the Walnut Creek residents. Let's see. And then,
Sorry, can you just say where the Almond Chewy neighborhood is?
So yeah, the Almond Shoey neighborhood, if we're looking at this map right here, it's that big empty space bounded by the freeway. To the south is Area C, the blue. To the north is Area B, and then downtown. Yep.
Thanks.
it's an awesome neighborhood. I don't live there, but it's got great old housing. It's really neat. Do we have, with all the parking meters and the technology that we have, do we have ongoing occupancy monitoring? I mean, the garages with the gates, we of course have access to that, but do we have it for the on-street parking?
Yeah, we do. They're called frog parking. It's called frog parking, but they're little sensors. They're like pucks, and they're actually inserted in the pavement under most of our parking spaces, at least in Area A. Over the summer or late summer, kind of right when we were doing this, start to do the data collection, we had done like an upgrade on a lot of them. So we do have live sensor information currently right now, yes.
Okay. Is there a way to connect that sensor information to the parking meters? To sort of moves you into dynamic parking, but, or
Yeah.
is it just a separate?
So there is a way, and Matt, jump in at any point, but there is a way, as far as I understand it, the connection. There was like a sensitivity issue, and so that connection, like even though the car had never moved, the occupancy information from the puck to that meter, it wasn't consistent, and so that turnover maybe was still a parked car the whole time.
Okay. Yeah, I've noticed when I do park in the Broadway shopping center garages, that sometimes the little lights aren't functioning well. And so it's a good guide, but it's not precise. So, okay. And then I'm curious, they're using the Locust Street garage as the example. It seems to be the one that's the busiest. Is there a scenario where that garage would have a higher parking charge to it, versus, say, the Lesher garage? Would that, by doing that, when I park, I'm parking agnostic as far as the cost goes. I don't look for the cheapest place. I just go park where I know I can find a space. But other people, wondering how many people that come to downtown would know that the Locust Garage has a higher parking price and therefore choose to drive down the street and park in the Lesher Garage, which has available space. Do we have an understanding of if we can shift people with that kind of precision pricing, if you will?
So if we think about it based on like the zones on the street and kind of the same idea, yes, and it would be something reviewed and looked into as part of the plan.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a possibility.
In your analysis, in your data collection, we know, I call it feeding the meter. Do we know how many, but I think if you have the Park Mobile app, you can just continue to add money to your meter, and so you could park all day as long as you keep adding money.
So if you pay through the Park Mobile app, it won't let you re-park in that same spot
Okay.
more than the 3 hours. So, but if you're using coins, then
Right.
yeah.
Do you know how many people are feeding the meter?
I don't have a sense of that now.
Okay. Yep, that's good for now. Thank you.
Thank you. My commissioners asked great questions, so I think I just have a couple left. Weekend drivers were more likely to use the garage. I thought that was interesting. Do you know why?
No, it's just based on like my own observation and kind of the feedback we've been hearing. The weekends, the Saturdays, those are a peak, and we do see a lot of maybe out-of-town visitors. Mm-hmm. And those out-of-town visitors, before you get to your area, you're looking for the parking garage. Like, where am I going to park? I'll pass by the restaurant, and then if not, I'm going to that garage.
Yeah. So
there's that type of just user behavior that could probably contribute to that.
Okay. The parking pass, there's a 600 max of that. We have a wait list. How long is the wait list?
Like how many
people,
active
do we know?
requests? So for the Locust Garage,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like 100. Both of them were about 100 something, between 100 and 200.
Okay.
And the length of time on that wait list, it depends on the garage, but it's 6 months to a year to get a pass.
Okay. And Have we ever, and those passes are to utilize those garages at any time?
Correct.
Have we ever thought about doing like a weekday only pass between certain hours for people who might be there more utilizing during the day, and then maybe something for residents who might be, or those who live in the area who might be more likely to frequent our, downtown for entertainment in the evening? Have we ever thought about doing something like that? Is that logistically feasible?
So we'll take a note of it, but yeah, my first thought is logistically enforcing that. But yeah, it's something we can look into.
Okay. That's it for me for questions. Thank you. At this time, do we have anyone here for public comment?
We do not have anyone from the public.
Okay. So then we will take comments from the commissioners, and city staff has offered up these questions to get feedback from us. So if you want to touch on any of these and then any of their comments, please do. We'll start at the end. Student Commissioner, do you have any comments?
I actually have a question and a comment. Can I ask a question? Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. For the parking passes, why are there only 600? Why not more?
That's a great question. So 600, it was determined some time ago that, so it's that balancing act of that long-term parking versus the short-term parking. We know that those passes are intended to serve those long-term parkers, but we still want spaces for the short-term. That 600 number spread throughout the garages. The idea was this is the amount of passes that could be given at this garage and still allow those 3-hour parkers without being completely filled up with 8 hours. So that's where that number came from.
And then the parking passes, is that only specific to one garage, or did it apply to multiple?
So the Locust garage, there's, as far as I'm aware, you cannot apply for that one any longer, even though it has 40. But the Broadway and the Locust, I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Like, so you would pay the monthly fee, and then do you have access to different garages, or is it just like one?
Yeah, so when you apply, you're applying specifically to either the Lusher or the Broadway. You don't get access to both.
And then for comments, I think the question about stakeholders, maybe reaching out to local high schools, because I know a lot of students have issues with parking, so maybe that's something worth looking into.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Ash?
Thanks. I believe on that, doesn't Las Lomas High School have a arrangement with Broadway Plaza for students to park there during the day for free or for a fee?
There is a cost associated with that pass. I don't have that number off the top of my head, or if they have their own type of managing of that permit process or that pass system.
I think one thing we should consider as part of this is an employee program, and I don't know what that looks like, but I know from a workforce development standpoint, a lot of the retail and restaurants are starting to raise concerns over being able to attract workforce, and that has to do with, right, like you could go to the veranda and park for free as an employee. If you work here, you have to pay. You can go to a restaurant in Danville and park for free. And so we need to address that as part of this, because long term that could hinder us from hiring workers. So that's number one. I would say I'd love to see a technology element in this where Walnut Creek engages with some pilot programs maybe in state-of-the-art technology that can help with curb management. It was something we talked about for feedback for the council priorities is, would be great to see Walnut Creek as a leader in trying new technology and trying innovative ways to solve some of these problems. It should be vetted. It should go through a process, but I'd love to see us as an early adopter of things. I would caution on the bicycle repair things that, while they are great and I love them, I know the orchards, when they put them in, because they have some cool bike lanes there in that shopping center, within 24 hours they are gone. And then they are just like ugly red poles that are useless there, and I'd hate for that to happen downtown. So just something to keep in mind, and I think you mentioned that as part of your presentation. I'm all for the concept, but that just is the reality of it. I just look forward to just continuing being a part of this. This is great work, and you really match data to try to understand this. So thanks.
All right, sorry, Vice Chair.
Waiting for my official permission. I think in a prior meeting, the prior chair made me say pretty please to do something.
I won't make you.
Which I complied with. I did have one quick question, and that's on these parking passes. Do they guarantee parking, or is it just for the fixed cost and convenience aspect?
There's no parking, like physical space provided for you. So yeah, if you come during the shopping season, during the Nutcracker, you're not guaranteed a space.
Got it. Thank you. So yeah, on your question on constituents or stakeholders, kind of two thoughts. One was the Walnut Creek residents at large, and what would entice them to come to their own downtown more, to spend their money here rather than going to Danville or up to Clayton or to the Veranda, et cetera, And then also it would be interesting to get feedback from, I'll say, the surrounding cities. Is there anything about our parking, curb management, traffic that keeps someone who lives in Danville, Alamo, Concord, Clayton from coming down here to spend their money? And is there anything we can do about that? From the one thing I hear a lot from people is just the 7-day-a-week meters. Maybe I don't pay a lot of attention to, because a lot of the other cities I go to, there's free parking, as Commissioner Ash was saying. You go to Danville, you can park for free all day long and walk around downtown. Just, the 7-day-a-week, gone are the free holidays, I believe, and free Sundays. It was, to a lot of people, that's like a shock to the system. And then finally, just kind of an overall recommendation. It will be interesting to take this data, if we can somehow, and maybe this is a part of the technology, could we somehow correlate the cost of parking, availability of parking data with the commerce data, how much money is being spent? Kind of going back to my comment about the Broadway Plaza garage, people are trying to get out of there in the 3 hours so they don't have to pay, even during the holidays, according to the data. So how much commerce and sales tax revenue are we losing, in lieu of the extra few dollars of parking revenue? And then my final comment would be on question 2. I'd say everything and anything we can do to make the downtown Section A, the core, a better experience and a safer experience for pedestrians would be paramount to me.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Patch?
Okay, so I'm a huge fan of parking enforcement because I think it actually increases bikeability and pedestrian-friendly streets, which is great. So I think it's fascinating to me to see that the on-street parking is so much higher than the garage parking. And a couple of comments that I have on that are, I know I made this comment last commission meeting, but our wayfinding signs could use some use, right? Because I think that part of it is people don't realize that there are garages that they can use. And this got asked during the questions of part one, but the signs that say the availability of spots, those are great. A cool thing I have seen in other locations are having, in addition to just the general number, ADA spots that are available and expectant mother spots that are available. So just adding a little more data for when people are looking for spots. I will note that our garages are like what I would consider on the outskirts of where people really want to be doing the high activities, right? Like on your map, the Broadway garage isn't actually even in the green zone. It's next to the green zone. So I know other cities have things like little golf carts that get people around areas so that they don't feel like they have to park exactly next to where they're going, just as an easy way to get people around. And golf carts are electric, so it doesn't add to any of the smog issues. So I don't know if the city can look into potentially doing a pilot program to see if that works or not. Obviously, that requires budget, but something to look into, especially since the bike share program wasn't successful and we didn't continue with that. For the identifying stakeholders, I'm curious because you have the Lotus Street Festival, which is awesome. Glad that we'll have a booth there. I'm curious if you can ask the city council if you can use their farmers market booth 1 week or two and have somebody there. I've seen the city council have data about the parking, especially when we started doing the zoned parking to educate people about it. So it might be a great place to continue that education and talk to folks about how everything's landing. It seems like we could lower the time limit from 3 hours to 2 hours and increase that turnover, especially if we have better wayfinding to the garages to get people to the garages. And then just as you do more research, love that it's data informed. Since we have so many spaces available in the orange zone, I'm forgetting, is that B or C?
Orange is B.
B, in the B zone, the one around BART, because there's lower occupancy there. I would be curious to see how many long duration parking you're getting on the side streets around that with no meters. Having lived in that area, I know people are parking there and walking to BART. So just would be curious to see how that would impact our parking meters in that direction.
Can I ask a quick question there? Is 100% of the orange the purple meters?
So there's no green, but there is curb space that is unmetered out there. So if we have a meter, it's purple, it's 10 hours. But there is curb that, Commissioner Patch's point, that's unmetered.
Thank you.
Yes, so those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Reese.
Great presentation, thank you, and a lot of data. So enjoy playing with that. Where to start? I think that what I found interesting about looking as you were presenting the data is that we really have some, there's a very little parking available in portions of A, and then even within area A, it seems like there are areas that are less parked. So Main Street is probably 100%, and California is probably 70% or something like that. And so something, it lends itself, and then the Locust Street parking garage is really full, but just down the street, a block and a half away, the garage, the Lesher garage has a lot of spaces. And I will say that when I didn't live in downtown Walnut Creek, and I drove here, I always parked in the Broadway garage off Cypress because it always had parking. Locust Street never had parking. And so we really seem to have this really tight knit of really fully occupied parking, and then it dissipates rather quickly. And where I'm going with this is I'm thinking that we need a better pricing strategy that brings potentially brings more revenue, more parking revenue to the city, at the same time as trying to push people out a little bit, so that those premium parking spaces cost more. And we didn't hear anything about how the parking revenues are being used. I'm assuming that that comes later. But in a lot of cities, they use the parking revenues to improve the downtown after they've paid for the parking enforcement and the parking operations and maintenance. And it would be great if we could find ways to increase parking revenue in order to feed it back into the downtown to make the, like other commissioners have said, make the environment more aesthetically pleasing, provide more amenities for the people downtown, make it more attractive, fix some of the cross-slope problems with sidewalks that make it difficult for somebody with crutches to walk down the sidewalk or a wheelchair user. I think it would be great if we could start thinking along those lines. And that has the benefit then of making sure that there is available parking in the core area, the core of the core, for people that are willing to pay more for it or that need it because they have some mobility challenge and so they can't walk a quarter mile to get to their destination. They can only walk, 500 feet. Right now, the way it's set up, the way it's functioning, that person that doesn't have a placard to park in a blue zone, but needs to be within a few hundred feet of the Locust Street garage, they're out of luck and they have to walk further. But if we price the parking differently, that person could get a parking space closer. Looking at the parking data, it looks to me like there's plenty of parking in downtown as long as you're willing to walk to it. The people that are more likely to walk longer distances for parking are the employees. And so I think this is an opportunity. Others have brought up, where do employees park? How do they park? We do have 10-hour meters for them, but it could be nice to actually increase the employee permits, but have those permits apply only to areas B and C where there is available parking right now. That would do a couple of things for an employee, especially a retail employee that's making minimum wage or tips. Rather than having to pay 10 hours a day for parking or 8 hours a day, however long their shift is, they are able to buy an employee parking permit for $50 for the month, and they're able to park in the outer areas for less money than if they had to pay every day. Right now, they have to pay every day. So I think that expanding the employee permit parking is important. I think that I'm super happy that we shifted from an 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. philosophy in parking, free parking on Sundays. I almost feel like at one point in the 80s that it was free parking on Saturdays too, but I not 100% sure about that. I love that we are parking 7 days a week because it allows people to come and visit the downtown on all days. If we had free parking on Sundays or Saturdays or in the evenings, the employees would all be parking in Area A, and there would be no parking for anybody. So I'm a strong advocate of 7 day a week parking and all day long. One of the commissioners mentioned, what about going to 9 o'clock? I think that should be considered. It is hard to find a spot if you're coming to a dinner reservation at 6:30, 7 o'clock. It can be a little difficult to find a spot. And it's because people are getting there and they're able to park past 8 o'clock without having to pay. So I could arrive at 5 p.m. and I could stay all evening. And I think if we extend to 9 o'clock or look into doing that, it might allow for people to be a little bit more aware of how long they're staying, and might open up some parking for the people that arrive in the later, towards the end of the evening parking enforcement period. I think the other issue, I think, going with the technology is that I know it's expensive and it may be infeasible financially, but it would be nice to have a dynamic parking system in place so that you could make parking adjustments. I know that we want to put a bound on that. We don't want you to charge 2 hours and then all of a sudden it's $4, $2 an hour, and then all of a sudden you make it $4 an hour. But is there a way for us to develop a system that gives the city flexibility within the program to bump the parking up or down by 25 or 50 cents an hour in order to better manage the system? And I think you would be able to do that if you had a program, a regular monitoring program, so that once a quarter or twice a year, you come in and check to see how the how the downtown is doing, and you bump the parking values a little bit in order to try to get some shift in people. Talked about 9 o'clock. I guess the other aspect, probably the last item, is you didn't talk about a reasonable walking distance for the different users, and that may help inform how our parking in downtown is doing. It looks to me like there's plenty of parking in downtown if you include area A, B, and C. Looks to me like there's plenty of parking available. The question is it appropriately located for the user? Selfishly, why I like 10 a.m. start time is it allows me to drive by Panama Coffee, park on the street, run in, get my croissant and cheese and sausage sandwich and a coffee, and go back to my car, and I don't have to find a quarter. I do that in Oakland, which starts at 8 a.m., and I always get a ticket, which means my $12 breakfast becomes a $57 breakfast. So I really like the fact that we have adjusted the parking hours for when the parking is really being used by the community, by the employees, by the visitors, by the workers, everybody, rather than just having parking enforcement whenever we feel like we want to have parking enforcement. I think that we're doing the right thing by having our hours different than what a lot of other cities do. But yeah, the reasonable walking distance, sorry, I got sidetracked. The reasonable walking distance, I think, would be important to then understand if maybe the employee permits giving more of them to area B and C is okay because they're walking a quarter mile, or if they're having to walk 3/4 of a mile, maybe that's not okay. But if there was some analysis or some assessment of that to explain some of the recommendations that you come up with, that would be great. And then last, on the dynamic pricing, it would be good to understand kind of order of magnitude what the capital expenditure and the O&M costs would be for dynamic pricing, and if our parking system could accommodate it. I would be, while dynamic pricing would be really neat, I would be more interested in seeing parking revenue go back into the downtown for aesthetics, amenities, and things of that sort that make our downtown a special place.
I will add, so that is what our revenues go to. It all goes back to downtown.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we put in a fancy dynamic parking system that's going to cost us, 50% more to own and operate and maintain, that means we're losing that much money that was going into the improvements of the downtown. And so there's got to be a consideration there. We can't just throw money at technology because it's great when we have the back end, not the back end, but we have the downstream of having a more aesthetically pleasing downtown because we have more of a fundamental basic parking O&M system. And then the last is that along the aesthetics, which I was debating whether or not to bring up, but I think parklets can really be additive if they're done right to a downtown. And I know that we would be putting them on Area A, which is where there's no parking available. But if through your assessment you determine that there actually is enough parking, if we include areas B and C, then maybe there can be, maybe there is some value to having more parklets in Area A, knowing that the parking shed is acceptable if in areas B and C as well, if that makes sense. So I'll be quiet now. Your turn.
Madam Chair, can I ask a follow-up question to something he said?
Sure.
So the money from the parking meters goes to the green trolley shuttle. It goes to the beautification and a couple of other things. Based on the numbers, it seems like we're probably doing well with revenue, but does anybody know where we stand in terms of revenue and budget and everything?
Matt, can you speak on that?
No, but I think we'll touch on it in part two, maybe a little bit of what we can share about that, those amenities, where they're going, and how that fund looks.
That'd be good. Yeah.
I actually think that's important because I know there's only so much that you can share, but we do need to, if we're going to be trying to push for recommendations to apply technology and increase costs, I think we need to understand the implications of doing that. And it sounds to me like the implications of spending more money on operating and maintaining our parking system takes away from some of the other amenities that we all enjoy. And so I think there needs to be consideration there as we're making financial decisions. And then that leads to the pricing decisions as well, which I believe this commission is responsible for identifying.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So regarding curbside curb management strategies, I do agree with the parklets are fantastic in their community building, and I like that sense in a downtown when you're trying to get people to walk around and feel that community feel and feel safe. So, to the extent that we can use some of that extra curb maybe to put in benches and little community boards, and we can even use those community boards for education around different things happening in the city, or even education around parking for when you are in a car, and how to find it. I think for some of the curb management strategies, it might be interesting too to talk to some of our other city departments to see if there's opportunity to partner up to fulfill other needs, whether it might be building art into our community, or maybe building toward our climate goals. I don't know if there are opportunities like that, but ways to build solar into, our parking garages. And some of this stuff can be projects that are revenue generating to help subsidize costs of implementing other technologies and things like that. I agree around programs for local retail and the restaurant workforce. I think it would be important to look at doing something to fulfill the needs of that community, because I do know that they park up into neighborhoods where it can become problematic and crowded, where there aren't necessarily neighborhood zones for parking. And I also want to be mindful that, yes, there are communities around us who parking is free and workers can work there and not have to pay for parking. And for lower wage workers, that cuts into wages, right? So I want to be mindful to that. As far as identified stakeholders are concerned, I do think that engaging young people is important. And I feel like every time I talk to a young person, I learn something new about technology. So it's always nice to engage them and get their ideas around how our society is changing and how we can accommodate them. And then I think it would be interesting to talk to like the commercial / delivery. I would almost consider that a separate stakeholder, I think, just because they're so prevalent now with Uber Eats and DoorDash and all of that, not to mention your FedExes and your UPSs who are delivering on our city streets. I hope that in the future, I know we're going to talk about revenues, and I hope that we not only include the parking revenues, but also citations and what happens with that, and maybe how those ebb and flow throughout the year. And then I hope that we have more discussions around these parking passes. I'm very intrigued, and I think that a tiered system might be something very cool to look into, because I'd be willing to bet there are definitely people who use it during the weekday and folks who would be interested in using it outside of that time frame. And I think it might be something that we could capitalize on. So I will leave my comments at that for now. And I think we can wrap up this agenda item unless anyone has anything else. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. That was a very in-depth, kind of overwhelming presentation. So, but I really appreciate your patience and level of detail. So with that, we will move on to, and please feel free to speak out if there's anything we did not address that you want more feedback on. So with that, we'll move on to item C, commission committee appointments. This is for our consideration. At this time, I will open up this item to public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to comment?
We have no members of the public waiting to provide comments.
Okay. So at this time, I would like to invite the commissioners to express their preferences for committee assignments. Yes, Commissioner Ash.
I'd love to stay on the CCTA Citizens Advisory Committee. So I'm doing some cool work, but I know I have an alternate waiting, but if I could have one more cycle, I think.
My firm is working on the countywide transportation plan and all of that documentation, so I have to recuse myself from being on that committee.
Okay.
So I don't want to fight you over it.
Anyone else have comments on that? Yes.
Yeah, so not to get into a boxing match with Commissioner Ash, I just have a philosophical question, which is there a desire to rotate different commissioners in and out of these committees, or is there more a desire to favor experience? So Commissioner Ash's case, a lot of experience being on there. Is there a philosophy that the commission as a whole wants to embrace? Sort of like we shift around commission vice chair and chair.
I don't know that we've ever had a philosophy around that. I think it's been who will do this. I, for one, can't take another evening meeting in my personal life, and so I'm not interested in that. But I don't know that we've ever had anything around these appointments. Have we? Does anyone else want to speak on that? No.
Yeah, we haven't. It's a difficult situation because I'll just say I'm of two minds. So if it was purely on just who's on it and such, I think that I would want to see Commissioner Ash leave the committee, because the committee I believe pretty strongly that we should be rotating responsibilities. However, I know since I've been on this commission that Commissioner Ash has worked his tail off to actually fill the committee and get representation throughout the county. And honestly, while my philosophy, this makes me go against my philosophy. I feel like I want to give Commissioner Ash one more year because he didn't get a full committee until last year. And he had worked at it since the beginning. And so I feel it would be nice to, if he wants it, it would be nice to say, congratulations, good job, thank you for getting people on board, and so we'll give you one more year. So that's kind of where I'm headed because of what Commissioner Ash has done in the last couple of years to take what was a committee that was just going to disappear and actually turn it into something. So that would be my suggestion.
Thanks, and I'd like to, and I know our calendar year to theirs doesn't line up for our appointment, but I'd love to at least serve through the remaining calendar year and the term of the officers there, which I think would take me through August. So I'd be open to revisiting also in August too as a time, but I appreciate actually all those compliments because.
Well, that's a question. Can we say Commissioner Ash for the remainder of his term on that committee and then have Commissioner Krellick take over?
I like that idea, and I like the idea of aligning our appointment with that time frame. It sounds like it would make more sense if someone from this commission is serving in a leadership role. It'd be odd to step down, right?
Yes.
Off of the committee. So I like that idea.
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner Reese, for, it wasn't obvious to all of us, all the work that Commissioner Ash put into building that committee. So first, let me recognize you for that. And gosh, I would just say, should we follow Commissioner Reese's precedent, and should we ask Commissioner Ash to say pretty please? And then he gets it.
I'm willing, well, I'm not commissioner anymore, but I'm willing to, I'll
Pretty pleased with ice cream and cherries on top, sprinkles.
Oh, wow, that's really good.
Would you like to make an official motion, Commissioner Reese?
Do you have, Commissioner, okay.
No,
I'll,
I'm ready to second it.
okay. I motion that we have Commissioner Ash continue with the CCTA committee up until August, at which time I would have Commissioner Krelling take over.
So I will second that motion. Just let me add a comment. I wasn't actually, in this case, I wasn't advocating for myself. I think when we get to a transition date, we should have another discussion and see who's passionate about it and pick somebody. It was more about the philosophical question.
Okay, I'll amend it to just say Commissioner Ash, and we'll revisit in August or July. July.
And I second that.
Great. I'll call roll.
Student Chair Kirsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Ash,
Aye.
Commissioner Krelling,
Aye.
Commissioner Patch,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cagle, Chair Cagle, going out of order.
Aye.
Vice Chair Reese. Sorry.
Well, you really messed that up.
Commissioner Reese
Aye.
and Chair Cagle.
Aye.
Thanks.
Just to note, the CCTA committee, they end as chair, and then the new chair takes over at a clean meeting, so it's not in the middle where I think we had this trouble previously too, with, when I was chair here.
It's always been a challenge, this meeting, with the shifting of roles.
The
Yeah, we
mayor,
did-
vice mayor happens for city council too. It's great.
Yeah, I think all the commissions go through this same thing where we're like, oh, let's do the ceremonial chair switch.
Okay, so the mayor's quarterly breakfast, this is the chair and the vice chair historically, should be the chair and vice chair. I don't know, I guess we can take this up if we need to formally vote on it.
As long as you're okay with the chair, vice chair, unless there's a discussion on that
Is there-
point.
is there any
So
need for
moved.
discussion? Okay.
Good for me.
I don't know that we need to have discussion on this. I do think that we need to have discussion on the next one. Do you want to run a vote for that?
Can I, just one comment on the quarterly meetings, I just go to those and I encourage others to, just as a member of the public, and sit in, and it's just a great way to hear from all the different commissions what's going on, even if you're not representing a particular commission. It's still a great meeting, if you're willing to get up that early.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
I'm thinking that we should just do one motion for all these approved changes.
Okay, all right.
So we
So
can
let's hold on that then, unless there's discussion on, doesn't sound like there's discussion on the quarterly breakfast. The next one is the Shared Mobility Working Group, and in the staff report, staff is suggesting that this group be dissolved because it's been inactive for quite some time. It was intended to meet at City Hall on an as-needed basis, typically during business hours. Is there any discussion around the Shared Mobility Working Group and if we dissolve it or not? Yes.
I have a question, because I actually brought that up 12 months ago, and then I was told that there was a need, there was a couple of projects for them to address this year. Did nothing happen and there was no meetings? Just, okay.
There have been no meetings. This kind of came out of the Lime Scooter pilot that we tried, and that has since kind of, that network has evolved and changed, and there's been no meetings on this. I'm proposing to dissolve it, just because it's not been meeting, but I am curious if there is interest in like a safety group and that kind of discussion, talking about bike and ped safety and what can be done there. Again, kind of meeting on an ad hoc basis as needed. We do have the local roadway safety plan, which you've all seen, and there are some ongoing action items that, we can update and kind of get opinions on there.
Thoughts on that?
Yes, I understand the need to dissolve it, or the desire to dissolve it since we haven't met in a very long time. But I do think it's important that there is some element of this commission being able to meet with staff about things like pedestrian, biking, scootering, that elements of it. Just because I think when we're in this forum, we do end up focusing on cars fairly often. So I guess I would be supportive of the safety committee or whatever you want to call it, where it does focus on those folks that don't have airbags to protect them.
In whatever form this working group takes, I certainly am in favor of Commissioner Patch staying on because she is very passionate about these issues, and would also be supportive of Commissioner Reese staying on if he so desired.
Okay.
If I really like the idea of shifting it to a safety discussion. I think one of the things that I've seen in other communities that have transportation commissions is that they are more involved on the safety side. They are more involved in the project side from the standpoint of safety. And I think having opportunities to have focused conversations around safety is an important aspect of the work. And I think we can be helpful to city staff. And I would be encouraged by, I think that's a great idea. And however we can help city staff in that process would be great.
Any other comments? Okay, I too really like the idea of a safety committee. I feel like that's practically our main purpose as a commission is safety. So I love that idea. Would anyone like to organize this into a collective motion?
Go ahead.
Do you want to do the motion? You can. Go ahead.
Sure, I'd like to, so I'll do a dual motion, I think would be the right process. I'd like to motion that the shared mobility group be dissolved and a new ad hoc committee be created that focuses on safety and alternative transportation, and that those members be Commissioner Patch and Commissioner Reese, and report to the Secretary of Transportation. This Transportation Commission.
I would second that motion.
Is that the proper motion we need, just to confirm with the chair?
Can you just add the mayor's quarterly breakfast will be served by the chair and vice chair as well, just to throw that in there so we cover all.
Yes, so move that the chair and vice chair serve as the reports to the mayor and mayor's quarterly breakfast meeting and updates.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Okay.
Student Commissioner Kirsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Ash,
Aye.
Commissioner Krelling, Vice Chair Krelling,
Aye.
Commissioner Patch,
Aye.
Commissioner Reese,
Aye.
and Chair Cagill.
Aye. Okay, lovely. Thank you all for that. Thank you for your willingness to serve. Okay, so we'll move on to our commissioners' announcements and brief reports on activities. Does anyone have anything they would like to share out from the commission? And then we'll go to staff.
I had something, I'm trying to remember it, so.
I'm good.
Okay. We'll see if vice chair's memories serves him.
It's not coming up. It was a suggested future agenda item, so I'll, whenever I remember it, I'll maybe email our commission secretary.
Okay. Staff, do you have any updates for us?
Yeah, I have a few. So we receive comments from the public, many requests about how our city should change in terms of traffic. And so in 2023, we received 263 of these requests. In 2024, we received 277. Year to date, we're at 59, so we're on pace for a little under 250. So staff does have a backlog of these requests, but I just want to note that they do take considerable amount of our staff time and resources, and it's a pleasure to see this feedback and to have insights into the community from residents themselves. Our signal technicians have been adding retro-reflective backings around our signal heads. You may have seen this specifically on California and many other signals around the city. So they have plans to add it to all of them, which is a great collision reduction factor, and we're excited for that. Some exciting news in the grant world. Brianna submitted for the HSIP grant to modify some traffic signals on Ignacio Valley Road to have protected left turns. So we were awarded $1.9 million for that. CCTA was awarded about $3.4 million for improvements around BART for a concept of a shared mobility hub. And lastly, in January, Rashad Culver brought the trail crossing improvements projects to you, and you all suggested that we should ask for more money. I think you said we should. We suggested 100K. You all suggested 120,000, and earlier this week we found out we were awarded all 120,000. So thank you all for your recommendations. So we're excited to move that project forward as well, and that's all for now. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, great work. Oh,
Yeah, congratulations.
yeah.
So we do actually have a couple outreach events before our next TC meeting. So TC is May 15th, which is also Bike to Wherever Day. In the past, staff has hosted a booth outside City Hall. This year, we're looking to do it at the Iron Horse Trail Crossing at Broadway Newell. So we found out we got the spot. And so for those watching, we'll be there. Come stop by. We are also looking to expand our hours from morning to maybe early afternoon. So stay on the lookout for posts from us.
Great.
What would be really cool is if you could do a one-day pilot of the diagonal crossing at that time.
We've already been talking about it.
All right. Well, thank you for those updates. Great work. I hereby adjourn the March 20th, 2025 regular meeting of the Transportation Commission. Our next regular meeting is May 15th, 2025.
Don't get to do that anymore. Here.
Miss it?